Good morning, everyone. I hope you're well. Whoa, that was my face arriving in a very large format then, wasn't it? Good morning, good morning. How are you? Good morning. You'll be pleased to know I'm not talking about FII week this week because that's been and gone. We're very happy about that. If you can see me, do say hello. I'm going to just keep an eye on the comments. Oh, we've got quite a few of you already. That's good. Good morning, Princess Sunshine. I swear that should be my name. I'm no princess. Um, Morning, Gemma. Morning, Kim. Morning, Natasha. Morning, everyone. Um, if you can see me, do say hello. Obviously, let me know where you're watching from. It's always quite nice to know where everybody's watching from. I'm going to be talking this morning about why the education system needs an enormous overhaul and why these promises and the lip service that we get from the government and the Department for Education, why that just isn't cutting it. And I don't think it's been cutting it for many, many years. So, yeah, we're going to be chatting about a lot this morning. Morning, Rebecca. Morning, Tracy. Morning, Lucy from rainy Derby. I know it's really miserable, isn't it? There's no sunshine at all. Just looking outside, yeah, horrible. Morning, Vicky from Kent. Morning, Gemma. Morning, Liz. Morning, Gemma, who's watching from Woking in Surrey. That's a nice local authority as well, isn't it? We adjust that. So, yes, we'll get through plenty this morning. But yeah, we've got a lot of promises being made by the government, and it's all lip service. Those of us who I think have seen all of this many, 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 many times from the government, all this lip service. I mean, us seasoned, I'm keeping an eye on the comments as well, by the way. Those of us who have been around the block a number of times will know that, yeah, it's all lip service and it's absolute nonsense. And so what I'm referring to here is, of course, the recent announcement that they're going to be giving us 16 more SEND schools. There's been no particular description or information. We've got loads and loads of questions. As always, they're putting things out to consultation. We've had a million consultations. We're not getting any further forward, are we? It's quite depressing. And, people say, oh, you're so cynical, Chrissa. I think we've just been here a million times and nothing ever seems to come to fruition. And so, yeah, it's sad times. Let's see who else is watching. Just making sure everybody's engaged. I think my comments have stopped. So let's see if I can refresh that. Oh, well, there's loads jumped. Fantastic. Hi, Elizabeth from Buckinghamshire. Liz said, my LA is Merton, better than some. Yeah, I don't know whether I've come across that personally, so that's good. Andrea from Tamworth. Gemma is saying, it says it's just so inconsistent, very frustrating. Mel Sean says, Croydon is horrible. Been to Croydon many, many times, actually. Just not for work. Okay, misspent youth. So So just to confirm, this is a Facebook Live. We're filming on Tuesday, the 14th of May at 9:30. If you're watching later on, don't shout at me or be offended if I don't say hello to you. We get so many messages from people who watch on playback and then they're like, you never say hello to me. But I am not a time traveler, so I'm really sorry about that. As those of you who've seen me before, and I've seen many, many, many names on there that I recognise, I'm Chrissa, I'm the founder of Sunshine Support. And like I said, today I'm going to be talking about school non-attendance because we need to understand why, why our children aren't attending. And also the absolute state of the current education system and why it doesn't work for so many, if not all, of our children. Like I said just now, the Department for Education has announced 16 new special schools in the UK, and shouldn't we be grateful? But I think it's fair to say that, number one, 16 isn't enough. Number two, the SEND hotspot areas are not getting any new schools. So, for instance, we know that Derby is widely regarded as the engineering capital of Europe. We have a very high percentage of spicy, neurospicy people in Derby. Derby isn't on the list. But I know many of you will say the same thing about your areas, because I've seen all the comments. Well, not all of them, but most of them. And I can see that there are so many areas, particularly the southwest, Devon, Cornwall, all that stretch of land there. They don't have anything being given to them. The provision that they're describing in some documentation is all alternative provision, not special provision. And it's altogether too generic. I think one of the problems that I know I personally have with the way that things are funded at the moment is that we are wasting and spending. All right, let's go with something less contentious. We are spending millions of pounds on independent specialist placements. Why do the councils not just set up their own specialist placements or provisions? We've seen so many special schools where they say, oh, that child looks like they don't fit in a mainstream. Let's lump them all in with everybody else in a special school. I'm on about specialist schools. There is a massive difference when you have a school that has a specialism in one area. For instance, local to me, well, fairly local, about 40 minutes away, we have a school that specialises in communication. So yes, you might have a mix of children in there, but they are a communication specialist school. So you may have children who have developmental language disorder in there, or children who might have dyslexia, or they may be autistic, but they have communication difficulties. These are the sorts of schools we should have in every area, not just autism schools. That when you look at the statistics for autism, it is far less prevalent than DLD, for instance, developmental language disorder, which is the most common learning difficulty. Yet we don't have DLD schools. There's like 1 or 2 in the country. Why do we not have more? But we need to be having these in-house specialist provisions, because actually, say, for instance, one particular child needs a specific school, a very specialist school. If you pay independent, you're talking upwards of £70,000 a year. But actually, if they keep it in-house, that's like a third of the cost. So we could essentially be educating 3 children for every one. So we need more specialist provisions. They're missing from this plan that I've seen. And I think as well, there's huge questions over what makes these provisions special. Where are they getting the staff when so many teachers are leaving the profession? And also, where are they getting the training? What training are they receiving? How can we call this a special provision? We're not seeing that level of detail. Now, I could go on and on and on for hours about my concerns and my questions about this next series of lip service that we seem to get from the government. But who's watching? I don't know. I don't think they'll ever answer the questions that we have, because quite simply, they don't listen to us. We complete, as parents, as teachers, we complete endless consultations every year, whether they're local or whether they're nationwide. And all we have is this lip service over the media about white papers, green papers. Millions of pounds go into this supposed research, and then the outcome of which never seems to come to fruition, does it? We never see it. And it's never tried and tested stuff. It's not actually looking at where we have the needs as a country. And I think this all proves that even with their own research tools and their own consultations that they are doing, they are not listening. So it's very unlikely they're going to listen to my Facebook Live. However, I do have a question for you this morning, because if the right people in government were watching this, or maybe some MPs, this got in front of the nose of an MP, by the way, tag your MP. But if we got this video into those hands and they managed to watch it right now or in the future, what question would you put to them? Put it in the comments. I'll come to them. What would you want to know? What do you want to know about the consultations, about the proposals, about SEND funding? And more importantly, what do you want them to know? So what's important to you? What's happening in your area? These are scandals that are not coming to the mainstream media enough. That we are literally clickbait. It really, really frustrates me. And yeah, I've got a lot to say on the matter. When we think about, Alan Bates versus the Post Office, how many decades did it take to get that into the mainstream media? And then we were all mortified. But until that point, an awful lot of the people that they were talking to just didn't believe them. And I fear that's where we are now. I'll come to your comments in a bit, but please do post your questions and also the things that you would like the MPs to consider. If you're comfortable putting what area you're in, by all means do that. And by all means, tag your MPs, because I think this should be a really informative thread. Now, I've talked endlessly about the problems with the education system in its current format. And I've done a lot of webinars. I've done, our podcasts. If you're not already listening to our podcast, do listen to our podcast. It's on Spotify. It's called Sip of Sunshine. And we have some really detailed conversations, almost like over a cuppa. And you get to hear what we really think. But also any interviews that I've taken part in, when I've been asked to go onto the BBC and, all the other different media outlets that I've been a part of, I have talked in detail and with absolute honesty about the issues that we face in terms of our children, in terms of not just SEND, just education in its entirety. It's not just about our children with additional needs. It's not me being one of those parents standing on my soapbox and shouting about, equality for all. At the end of the day, the education system is not fit for purpose. We know because actually, if you put the kids to one side for a second, the teachers are leaving. They don't want to be a part of it anymore. I speak to teachers on a daily basis. I have a lot of teachers in my own personal community, my friendship circles. They do not want to be doing this anymore. This isn't what they signed up for. So it's all children and the teachers. And yes, okay, some do well, but imagine how much better they could do if we had an enormous overhaul of the education system. Now, you've probably all seen the picture I shared yesterday on our Facebook page of the Victorian age school. And it just looks so similar to what is happening today when I decided to do some research and see how education has evolved. Now, special education has evolved. I appreciate that as SEND parents, we always feel like there's so much more that we need to be doing. But I can assure you, because somebody very, very close to me was a special educational teacher in the 70s, and I assure you things have moved on. I'm not going to be talking about that today, but maybe one day we'll get her on a podcast or something and we'll have a good chat about how things have evolved. But they have. But education, in terms of what we think of as education, mainstream education, it looks the same as the Victorian ages. And many agree that, this archaic approach is just not appropriate for learning in this day and age. It's not appropriate. However, I think it's important that we take a deeper dive here, because some people are looking at it on the face of it and sort of saying, no, that doesn't look like education. And I appreciate there's some people who take things very literally. So I'm going to go a little bit more into detail this morning. Now, you've probably heard me talk about, different industries and how they've kept up with trends and needs of society over the last couple of decades. The retail industry, for instance, that's the one I always talk about. They accommodate their shoppers, and it's all, of course, they're incentivized because it increases their sales. But essentially, the way that we shop now is very different to the way that we shopped, say, 20 years ago, where we had to swipe our bank card or pay in cash and sign our name. And now we just pay with our Apple Watches and we pay a machine. We don't have to talk to people. By the way, I know people hate the self-service checkouts, but as a neurospicy person myself, I love them. Um, anyway, the retail industry, along with many, many others, have made significant changes to the way that they practice, the way that they do business, because if they didn't, quite simply, they would have gone out of business. We know that there are businesses that didn't move with the times and they've gone out of business. We've seen businesses face difficulties and have to adapt, severely adapt, in order to remain in business and remain a viable company. And, say, for instance, the film business, this is something I was talking about this week with my husband. Think about how we would have watched films as kids, okay, versus how we watch films now. It could be that we watched on a VHS that would get chewed up, particularly if us neurospicy lot keep playing the same part of the film over and over. There would be one TV for the entire family, no remote control quite often, 4 channels. Anyway, I could go on. But also, we used to go down to Blockbuster, didn't we? And hire a film. And they didn't move with the times, and look what happened to them. So many film businesses went out of business because they didn't keep up with the times. So you don't have the video shop anymore. And this is why, because we've moved on. We now have Netflix. We now have everything on demand on our TVs that don't need remote controls, because we just speak to them and tell the TV what we want it to do. And we've got endless amounts of channels, and all of the rooms in our house seems to have a blooming TV, and we can watch our films on our watches, on our computers and our phones, whatever. But this is where we are with education, in terms of, if it doesn't keep up, if it was a business, it would go out of business. And I think, if you think about business 20 years ago, okay, a bit longer than 20 years ago, 1984, let's go back into the 80s. Nobody would work for a business that is practicing like a 1984 business, because the working conditions would be appalling. HR and employment laws are very, very different now. You were allowed to smoke in businesses. I mean, I actually remember teachers having a little tipple in their top drawer. It's very different now. But even if those businesses survived, they wouldn't have any staff, because nobody would want to work there. And so it's really important that, as a society, we keep up with the times. Some of us like old-fashioned things. Some of us are quite traditional, but we still have the majority of our life moving forward. We're still sort of buying into this new age thing because it makes our life easier. We love convenience, don't we? So anyway, I could go on, as usual, but let's have a little look at education in more detail, because some have said I'm being a little far-fetched by comparing today's education to the Victorian ages. So I tell you what, for those people, and to make it just easier for everybody, let's keep it more recent. So the 80s, I can talk with confidence about the 80s because I'm an 80s child. I know, I just don't look old enough. But education was delivered in the same sort of school buildings, if not the same school building. I know where I went to primary school, where I have very fond memories, that primary school is still exists, and it's a very stable structure. So those classrooms, I'm guessing, would look the same right now. Classes of 30, maybe more. We are hearing about classes of 45 in some areas, in some schools. When we were in infants, maybe we were in groups around the table, but as we got older, went into juniors, we're all facing forward. And of course into senior school, where we were all in lines facing forward. Expectations, of course, were to sit still and listen. And we were punished if we moved or if we didn't listen. And we were punished for being immature and infantile, despite not having any control over that. There were beautifully kind and wonderful teachers, and many of whom were bullied out of the system. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And the children really, really adored them. They were the teachers that we remember. They were the teachers that we know went on to have mental health crises. They went on to be sacked or, like I say, bullied out of the system. But they are the ones that we really, really adore. And there was abuse for the teachers who didn't conform. There were abuse for the children who didn't conform. If you refused to conform, you were ostracized. Your family was ostracized. I remember, because I watched it happen. It didn't happen to me, because I conformed, and I was a high performer, high achiever, and a very typical ADHD girl of the 80s, actually. Not spotted, because I was just a good girl. But teachers didn't tend to have teaching assistants. I don't remember many teaching assistants from the 80s, but they did have autonomy. That is the big, that's what it's all about for me, I think. And many of the teachers that I talk to, is that autonomy. They taught away from the curriculum to make our education enjoyable and well-rounded. And they were engaging teachers. I remember, I had the most amazing teacher, and he'd say, this afternoon, we're meant to be talking about, the Bible. I went to a church school, and he said, but you all seem to be a little stressed today. So I thought I would play the guitar and we'll just have a real great sing-song. He then passed the guitar around and we all had to go. And he gave us some basic lessons in music and guitar. That was a teacher that I remember 40 years on. I remember his name. I remember how he made me feel. I remember how engaging his lessons were, but he had the autonomy to do that. He wasn't then punished for that. And it's really frustrating, actually, to see how little autonomy there is now, but I'll come to that in a second. But schools back in the 80s were considered the only way to educate. I don't remember children being home educated. I don't remember maybe one special school, but it was so far removed from my life. I wouldn't have a clue what goes on in that school. There was no integration into the community. We weren't ever promoted or encouraged to talk to children that looked differently or lived their lives differently to us. And so there was a huge amount of segregation. But the education that we received was mostly inside and stuck in our classrooms. And then you fast forward to today, much of this is the same, isn't it? Yes, okay, we could argue that we have more teaching assistants because our children are considered unruly and they need controlling, apparently. Teachers are so controlled. This is the bit I really don't like. This is the bit that I think is letting us down enormously. Teachers and children alike. So children are controlled by the teachers who are controlled. So the teachers don't have a say over this, okay? They have no autonomy. We even have teachers reporting now that they are scripted. So they have to read from a script every time they interact with a child. We had a teacher recently show us her lanyard, and on the lanyard was all the script that she's allowed to use. And it's checked. They're basically checked up on to make sure that they're reading from this script. There is no autonomy. So no longer, I mean, it's bad enough that they don't have control over their lesson plans and stuff, and that every year is delivered the same. They're saying the same thing, delivering the same lesson in the same format with the same topics, and that is all controlled. They can't, despite their years of training and experience, the system does not trust our teachers enough to be able to deliver the lesson according to the cohort in front of them. Okay. Why? Why are we not giving teachers this level of respect? It's absolutely appalling. But then to take it a step further and say that they now have to be scripted, it's disgusting. One of the things that I think in the world of work, which, by the way, we're meant to be preparing our children for, we don't act upon scripts. When I look at Sunshine Support and our team spread over the country, nothing that we do is scripted. It has to be legal. Of course it does. It has to adhere to the rules. And yes, okay, we would refer to law and legislation and policy, but we're not scripted. And I don't know a single, apart from a sales call center, which they are asked to read from a type of script, but they are given a level of autonomy. That's the only job I can think of that's scripted. So why on earth are we scripting our teachers to script our children? What are we setting them up for? If we quiz every day in a school and we look through what is being delivered by the teachers to our children, what is it going to benefit them? What am I trying to say? What is the benefit to them? What is the benefit to their future? What are we setting them up for? By encouraging children to not use toilets, what are we setting them up for? I don't understand. By telling children their voices are not valid, that they have to shut up and be still and just be seen, what are we setting them up for? What are we educating them? What? Are we telling them that they're valid and empowering them? No, we're not. We're doing quite the opposite. And so, yeah, so by not giving teachers basically the freedom to do what they're trained and experienced to do, that is all being pulled away from them. And then they have all this added paperwork on top, and it's just mounting up for teachers. And the politics, oh my God. So many Senkos come to us and say, I am not fighting the system, I'm fighting the system and my head teacher. I am also but I'm butting heads. We covered it in enormous detail on our recent podcast. Do check it out, because I'm not going to just replay the podcast here. But Kelly Jarvis and I talked about why Senkos butt heads with the rest of the teaching staff. And there's a constant battle. It's constant politics. We're looking at money all the time. It's really, really sad. And I think what's incredibly heartbreaking is those teachers that are my age who were inspired by their teachers in the 80s and the 90s, and they were inspired to go into teaching, and they, had their vocation that, yeah, this is my vocational call. I am going into teaching because this is what I want to do. I want to be like that teacher. I want to inspire children like me to go on to change the world, to mold and inspire and empower. Those teachers don't recognize the profession that they went into, the profession that they long to be a part of. These teachers who are now in their 40s, when they were in their young years and receiving this lovely education from connected, engaging teachers who had autonomy, they were inspired and they longed to be one of them. We all had one of those teachers, at least one, that we were like, I want to be like her or like him when I'm older. But that person, that teacher doesn't exist anymore. So that profession that they long to be a part of doesn't exist anymore, because they're just part of a conveyor belt of just government funded nonsense. And it's controlled by people who have no idea about teaching. So I could go on about this for hours, as with most of the things I've talked about this morning, but I'm just very wary of time. So why doesn't, my question then, I guess, to myself is, and this is sort of where my thinking has sort of been throughout all of this, why doesn't it work anymore? Well, it's clear. It's not moved with the times. And in fact, not only has it not moved with the times, but it's been stifled. Like, our teachers are stifled. Their creativity has been removed. Their autonomy has gone. So they no longer are inspired by their own profession. So how on earth are we expecting them to inspire and engage learners? One of my kids, her teacher just doesn't seem to be interested. And it makes me really sad. She just seems really sad all the time. One of my other children, she had a teacher who just kept crying all the time because she was just so sad. And I remember when Ofsted came in and she spent 2 days crying. The children were so deeply heartbroken for her. They came home and they were so concerned. This is what the teaching profession is doing to teachers. So what on earth is it doing to our children? I think when we look at real life, so take school and education and that sort of stuff, take that away for a second. And when we look at our children and the way that they access life, the stuff that they do with us, the stuff they do when they're not in school, they've got so many options, haven't they? They've got so much autonomy. We give them choices, yeah? Everything is adapted these days. When I think of like any activity really, whether you go to a trampoline park, whether you go to a climbing centre, they have SEND-friendly sessions, don't they? And you don't have to have SEND to be a part of it. If you feel like it would suit you and your children, you can go along. And actually, the way we sort of engage in many leisure activities, travel, shopping, gaming, computers, holidays. Everyone in those industries is adapting to make things more accessible, because companies are finding new ways to ensure that things are inclusive. And of course, they're incentivized by that, because by being more inclusive, they're making money. Yeah, I get that. But actually, it is making them better people, because every time they run one of these inclusive sessions, they're learning something. Okay. But also, like I said about retail, some of us really don't like having to have that small talk with somebody over a till. So actually going to a computer where we can do it all ourselves and feel like we've got more autonomy over that, that's better. Other people, they have the choice, because right next to the self-serves is a till with a human being on it. So you have the choice, you have autonomy. So what's frustrating, I think, for our children is that they have this amazing life with autonomy and choices. Autonomy comes up a lot, doesn't it? But they've got choices. They can choose how their life plays out, except for in school, because that's remained the same as it was 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Classes of 30 or more, stationary learning. You must sit down, sit on the carpet, sit on your chair. Tested by exams in exam conditions that you would not do normally. There are no jobs where that is normal. Okay. My team here at Sunshine all have certain qualifications that they like to upkeep, and we want them to upkeep. But they don't have to sit in those conditions. They're not expected to sit still. There are other ways to control cheating. I appreciate that we need to, make sure that nobody is cheating. But again, is there not better ways of making sure that our children are understanding things? Exams are great for those who have that memory where you can snapshot things. But for so many children, they are crippled by the anxiety going into them. So actually, you're not getting them at their best at all. It's ridiculous. A lot of these learning conditions are impossible to adhere to. And our children aren't encouraged to challenge what is being taught. They're not encouraged to challenge the way things are being taught. I know one of my daughters, she's very, very outspoken, and I'm very proud of her. And she is forever getting into trouble with one particular teacher at school because she calls out the practice. And I'm teaching her now, actually, rather than calling it out, ask a question. So be curious about what's going on. And it's interesting because she switched her questioning to, Miss, I'm curious that you've just done this. I was just wondering why. And actually, she's getting a much better response. So she's not getting detention anymore. But that is absolutely indicative of the education system. Don't question a thing, otherwise you'll be in detention. But that's not real life. How are we inspiring artists? How are we inspiring the next generation of scientists? How are we inspiring our children to challenge what we know? How are we going to improve? I'm looking out onto my drive and seeing my cars, okay? And I've got one diesel car and I've got one electric car. It would have taken a child who grew into an adult scientist or engineer that went, we've got a better way of actually fueling cars. Shall we challenge what we know about petrol and diesel and go with the electric? Somebody had to do that, but who is inspiring them at grassroots level? It's really, really important that we are. And I think children are only learning about the plan that was set out for them by the government and is being delivered by teachers who have no autonomy. If they learn differently to that plan, because that plan only is set up for the people who actually set it. And by the way, the people who set these plans weren't educated in our education system. They were educated in a private education system in a completely different way, and they all got into trouble. We know about the trouble. They constantly get into trouble now, yet our children are punished for very, very minor things. Anyway, but I could honestly, when I'm on my soapbox, if our children learn differently, so maybe they learn in a different way, it's been delivered in a certain way, they need it in a different format. Maybe they learn more quickly, maybe they learn more slowly, or if they perhaps won't conform, because there's some children who are very, very hot on their own moral compass and ethics, and they won't conform. those kids are considered to be different, and they're looked down upon as a drain on society, instead of us celebrating them and saying, how, do you know what? High five to you for not being the same as everybody else. How boring is it to be the same as everyone else? When I recruit team members into Sunshine Support, I'm not looking for two people the same. I'm looking for people who will complement what services we provide to the wider audience. We have autistic people in our team, and they have a very, very strong place in our team because they have a specific way of working, and I love their brains and I love what it brings to the table. We have a bunch of ADHDers who together, it's magical to watch a bunch of autistic people and ADHD people working together, because the way that that work happens, honestly, employers are missing out on a treat not having neurospicy people work for them. We have dyslexic people. You know, one particular dyslexic person, and I know he won't mind me saying, he won't write his ideas down, but he verbalizes the most tremendous ideas. But actually, in a school system, his ideas would be worth nothing because he couldn't write them down. What I'm saying is, it makes up, look at my dress, okay? This is Sunshine Support and everything that we stand for. And this is what we should be celebrating in society. We don't want everybody being that shade or that shade. We want it to be a colourful array of different abilities, different ways of learning. And the thing is, with abilities, abilities are only scored on a centralised system set by one bunch of people. What about all the other abilities? You know, I hate how that's always sort of seen as a kind thing to say. No, it's just nonsense. I'm not being kind. I'm not being kind right now by saying, can we consider everybody? I'm being normal. That's what we should be doing. None of it makes sense to me. Anyway, in summary, appreciate I've dragged on a little bit this morning. Hopefully, you're still with me. In summary, our children are accessing life in 2024, but they're accessing and expected to access their education in 1984. And if they can't or they won't, they're considered to be a burden, and their mental health is then destroyed because they're being told, no, you don't fit into our box. That's not the way we do things here. You either do it our way or you're a weirdo. So I'm going to come to your comments now, all right? I'm going to calm down a little bit and come to your comments. Okay. So Zoe said, Kelly Bright is on the One Show tonight, highlighting the EHCP and SEND situation. We've reached out to Kelly actually quite a few times, and we wrote a blog together, strangely enough, but not actually in the same room, for Giovanna Fletcher. And so we would love to be able to get in contact with her. If anybody knows her, please do put her in touch with us, or tag her in this video. Gemma says, my daughter has been failed by her school, year 9 autistic, and she's been declined in EHCP, waiting for tribunal. It's appalling, absolutely appalling. We hear too much of this. Jojo says, my daughter has been failed massively by the education system. She's now set to fail her GCSEs and is struggling to access any education. They have set up online learning without any consultation, which she can't manage as she finds it too awkward. She's autistic with ADHD. Do you know, this absolutely breaks my heart, because that system that's been set up, that education system has been set up, it doesn't work. And now she's being tested on a system that didn't work. And not only does it not work, it certainly doesn't work for her because she's of the spicy variety like me. And they're not even listening to her. I mean, this has been the whole Facebook Live this morning, is that nobody's listening. It's absolutely appalling. And somebody else says, even when the plans are put in place, they're not followed. Yes, I'm currently going through that process at the moment for one of my children. Harriet says, today's children are being broken by the system. My academically able daughter really wants to be in school, but she can't deal with the system, is being broken by this failing system. Absolutely. And I must say, on that note, we do have a webinar coming up on education other than at school. So if you're watching this right now and the school system is not working for your child, this is no it's nothing to do with your child. It's to do with the fact that the education system doesn't work. But there are other ways, and that is a massive benefit to today's learning, because this wasn't available in the 80s. On the 20th of June, we have our education other than at school. I'm going to try and copy the link and stick it into the comments here. Hopefully that worked. Yeah. Okay, I've just copied that link and popped it into the comments, because do come along to that. In fact, next week we've got a webinar on ADHD children that's been delivered by Kelly Jarvis, our specialist educator. And the following week, we've got a webinar on emotional regulation in autistic children and young people. So again, if any of these things are, stuff that you want to learn more about in order to take this learning into school, or maybe you are a school and you want to do better, come along to those. In fact, we've got loads of stuff coming up, which we'll share links to in the comments. Faye says, my son's school said they cannot meet need last year. My child has been out of the classroom with his peers because of his behaviour, so he's in a room away from his whole class. My son already feels different, but this is just breaking him day by day. I can't take him out because I'll be fined yet again, and the LA are sidelining me because I've chosen a specialist school, but it's out of their area. My son is now at home, excused again, or excluded again for the 12th time for 5 days. I work full time and have to. What do they think this does to us as a family? Absolutely. And I think it's absolutely heartbreaking when our children are excluded for something that actually is linked to their disability. It's actually against the law. So the Equality Act protects them. However, we do need to access this information for ourselves. Now, if anybody is worried about exclusions or suspensions, it doesn't matter how short they are. It could be a half a day. It could fall under the radar of what you're allowed to report to your governors. That's absolutely okay. If your child has been excluded, or perhaps they're being put into isolation because of their differences and their difficulties, we have a webinar on our academy that covers your rights, because you do have rights and there is something you can do. I know because I've accessed these myself for one of my children, and actually the law is quite clean. It's very, very specific, and there is some fantastic case law that protects our children. I'm not a solicitor, I'm not a barrister, I'm not a legal advisor. However, I know some of this stuff as a parent, but what I'd strongly recommend is get yourself onto our Sunshine Academy, get yourself signed up and watching these courses, because that 2 hours that you spend watching a webinar on exclusions and disability rights in the Equality Act will be probably the best 2 hours for your son. So do check them out. Gail says, you're so right. Teachers are subjected to so much pressure to cram in so much into the curriculum learning, more than there is time in the day to teach. And it restricts creativity and any exploration. At my school, we try so hard to be creative, inclusive, and flexible, but it's hard. I'm a teacher, SENCO, and parent of a child with SEND. Funding cuts also means we have less funding for teaching assistants. Honestly, it breaks my heart, Gail. It breaks my heart. I have so many friends who work in this profession, and they are trying so, so hard. One friend in particular is really SEND friendly because she's just immersed in the world herself. And she's been an absolute diamond for me and an absolute rock at the toughest times that I've had as a SEND parent. And her creativity is just stifled. Her flexibility within her classroom learning. So one of her children historically in the class needed just a different type of t-shirt in order to learn. And she's like, yeah, whatever. If it helps him to learn, I don't care what color t-shirt or what style t-shirt, or, if it feels better for him, then it feels better for me. This is all good. And she got absolutely torn a new one for allowing that child to have that in the class. So parents, be aware that when you might think a teacher is being awkward about something, it's probably not coming from them. Joanna has said, I get that. I don't know what I was saying at the time, Joanna, but you said our SENCO has outright given us false information, which was clearly more budget influenced than medically correct. And I also think with Senkos, having talked to a lot of Senkos, because we get about 20 Senkos a week applying for jobs with Sunshine Support. And so I like to have conversations with them. And an awful lot of the Senkos that I talk to will say that a lot of the information they're given is by the local authority. So they put on training courses regarding EHCPs and funding and things like that, and they're given false information. But they think, quite rightly, we've been put on this training. It's by our local authority. We thought we could trust the information they were sharing with us. We've now done an IPSI course, or we've now come to a Sunshine Support course or whatever, and realised that it's completely different. The law is so different to what we've been fed. But, they are absolutely under pressure and don't have any spare time to be able to do their own learning in law because they're a teacher. So it's really frustrating. There's loads of, there's just massive problems in this industry. Catherine says it would make teachers' jobs easier if children had the support they need. Absolutely, 100%. How can teachers teach in mainstream when there are children who should have specialist provision but don't because there are no places? If when children have an EHCP, it says small groups. The small groups thing is quite frustrating. I'm not sure if I'm reading it correctly, but a lot of our children have this small groups work, or small group work, should I say, listed on their EHCP, but we need to know more than that. So this is a little tip. If you have small groups written into your EHCP, you need more information than that, because actually in a class of 45, a small group is 40. In a specialist provision where they have classes of 8, a small group would be 4. So now I'm not saying that you have it written into your plan a small group of 4, because that actually makes it almost impossible to carry out. But you could have it small groups of between 4 and 8 children, something like that, something more specific. I hope that's helped those of you with small groups written into their EHCP. Taya says, my Senko tells me they cannot meet my child's needs, but then when pressured by the local authority, they agree to the plan and say they can meet needs. The local authority dominate over schools to not have an independent thought and be truthful to parents, leaving children in horrible and unsuitable situations. And, we work with a local Senko of a mainstream school. He's absolutely brilliant, and he is not afraid of the local authority, and it makes a big difference, because we had a particular case where the child should not be in mainstream education. The child actually needed something very, very, very specialist. The child had been failed by their infant and junior school, and they were now going into a senior school that was just not suitable at all. In fact, it was heartbreaking to witness. And this particular Senko said, no, we cannot meet needs. This child absolutely needs a specialist school with smaller classes. And the local authority tried and tried and tried to coax this Senko around, and he didn't budge at all. And we've just won the child's case, actually. And the child will be going in September to her brand new school, and we're very excited for her. But how amazing that Senko was for standing firm, and he was absolutely instrumental in the winning of that case. Liz says the biggest LA cop-out is ordinarily available guidance. Every teacher is a teacher of SEND. It's untenable, as most teachers are desperate to help their children to thrive mentally, physically, and academically. Absolutely. And the SEND Code of Practice says that all teachers are a teacher of SEND. But who, it's really frustrating, because the SEND Code of Practice says that, but then there's no additional funding to help those teachers get the training they need in order to be a teacher of SEND. It's just this assumption that they should just do it off their own back, with what time and funds, by the way. There are babies at school, and we just can't do it all, and it's exhausting. The profession has definitely changed for the worst. It's not holistically child-centric anymore. Absolutely. Faye says they're all on a hamster wheel. This is when we were talking about the lack of autonomy. Kelly Jarvis. Kelly always makes me cry, okay, in a good way. So Kelly says, Kelly is our head of advocacy and consultancy here at Sunshine, and she's a very, very experienced specialist head teacher. We're very, very lucky to have her. And Kelly says, I wanted to be that teacher. So when we were talking earlier about inspirational teachers that we had, Kelly wanted to be that teacher. And because I know Kelly and I know her really well, this is really an emotional thing. I wish I'd not come to your comment now, Kel. And Kelly says, I hopefully became one. You absolutely did. Kelly actually worked at a very specialist school where there were a lot of children with very complex presentations, in particular PDA. And for those of you who understand or know even a little bit about PDA, which is also called pathological demand avoidance, it's really, really tricky to help those children to learn, because quite commonly they've been traumatized by a system that didn't help them and wasn't set up for them. So they've become quite disengaged with learning. And it's actually very rational to think of it this way, that they've been traumatized and neglected and abused by a system that really did not help them. Then why on earth should they trust anyone else to sort of learn from? And Kelly was instrumental in turning those children's lives around and engaging them in learning again, however she could. So, you know, I'm not saying that Ofsted was completely out the window, because they had an exceptional Ofsted rating. However, everything was child-centric. So Kelly, as a head teacher, attended every single annual review and then wrote the provision for that child based on the annual review. Honestly, I've seen it in practice. One of my children went to Kelly's school, and that's how we know each other. And yeah, absolutely, so it can work. And actually, Kelly consults into schools and shows them how to be creative with what they've got. And she's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. If you know a school who wants to learn more about SEND provision, even if it's mainstream, get in touch, because a day with Kelly and it will change their lives. Faye says, that's why so many teachers who have life skills have left, because it's not about the child. How many teachers at schools near you are like the children themselves? They will do as they're told and just follow the scripts. Absolutely. And actually, do you know, I was talking to another teacher who's heavily scripted, and she said, I said, why are you still there? And she said, we're protecting the children from this academy. We're protecting them from the CEO and everything that trickles down, because the head teachers are all very good friends with the CEO. They go on holidays together, and now we're all heavily scripted. We're all in this sort of strange institution, and we have a duty to protect the children from that. And that's really sad, that education's become more about protecting from the system than actually engaging learners. It baffles me, absolutely baffles me. Katie says the teacher's workload is far too much to be able to really know the children in their class. I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Lucy says, yes, that's why I couldn't work in primary anymore. They wanted programmable robots that say whatever the head says is the right thing to say. I am seeing this a lot at the moment. And by the way, I'm not saying this is in every school. I'm just seeing it a lot. I'm hearing it a lot. And I appreciate that the kind of circles that we move in at Sunshine are not happy circles, sadly, because if you've got a school that's very happy and a bunch of learners who are engaged and attending and very happy, and a bunch of parents who feel very connected to the community and the school community, and they're very happy, they are not on our radar at Sunshine. They don't come to us. They don't need us. Rebecca says, I left education because of this mindless control. Honestly, Rebecca, there are so many like you, so many. Andrea says, funding for schools is lacking and fully qualified SEN teachers and assistants are being neglected. If they were funded better, then maybe the trust and the respect would be better. And do you know what? Going back to the strikes that happened last year, the teacher strikes. Again, I spoke to a lot of teachers. Okay, I'm talking, when I say a lot, I don't know, upwards of 30. Okay, 30 or more. And I had one-to-one conversations with these teachers, people I know really well, and just people that I met through work, and I was quite inquisitive about what was going on. And not a single one of them said it was about wages. They said it was about the funding. They said it was about the conditions. They said it was about the support and the resources that they need in school in order to do their job. They talked about SEND provision. They talked about resources. It was all resources and funding and provision. Not one person came to me and said they wanted a wage increase. Yet the unions were only talking about salary increases. So there's a big disparity here. It's quite concerning. And, you know, quite a few of them were saying I'm being expected to strike, and I will stand by those that I work with and those in my union and everything else. However, I'm striking for better provision for our SEND kids, for all of our children, actually, for better resources, for better funding within the classroom, within the school. But actually, that's not what the message was, that's not the message that was being delivered to government. So it's quite frustrating. It is just a huge amount of confusion across the board. Oh my goodness. Pod says the autonomy loss is real. Yeah, we've talked a lot about that this morning, haven't we? So, oh my goodness, there's so many comments. I really do hope that you tag all your MPs, you know, because actually these comments are very, very powerful. And somebody needs to stand up and do something. We have had, you know, protests from us in the SEND community. We've had strikes ourselves. We've had marches. We've had consultations and petitions being delivered to government. They are not listening. We are just the small people. As Alan Bates in the post office scandal said, we are the little people. And we are fighting an entity that's funded by the government to keep us quiet. MPs need to stand up now. They need to be listening to this. They need to be looking at these comments. They need to be listening to their constituents. They need to be listening to the people who they meant to serve. So please do tag your MPs in this. I can see some have been tagged, which is brilliant. We need a peaceful revolution, says Riley Gordon. Absolutely. Gemma says, my boy was suspended for a day and he did not cope. He sat outside school all day with his bag on his backpack. This was a week after starting his ADHD meds and he was all over the place. Oh my God, I want to cry. Who's winning? When we're telling our SEND kids that they're not welcome, who's winning? Ah, this really gets me, guys. Really gets me. Faye says it's not about how many staff they can't afford to support these children. It's about the right staff. Get the right people in the right places and the rest will follow. Absolutely. I'm paying them some respect. Don't script them and strip their autonomy from them. Please do. I can see that there are lots of you now are tagging your MPs. Tag them, tag away. Oh my goodness, this is amazing. Hopefully this will cause a change. So Anta's come on to say, are we chatting about anything particular? Yes, we are. We've just been chatting for the last hour. So feel free to watch it back, Ant. I know you've not always been happy with what we aim to do here at Sunshine, but we're trying our best and we're doing more than most. Gemma said, I've just got him back into school after 6 months of school avoidance, and that's when her son was excluded. I mean, that's just even more heartbreaking. Gemma, if you'd like any help, get in touch. We will absolutely help you. So with that, guys, it's been an hour. So I'm going to get off my soapbox and get back to my work. If you need anything at all, just ping us a message. Keep tagging your MPs in this video. It's really, really important that we make change. If you want any support, we've got our Cuppa and Chat in Derby this Friday. It's a free Cuppa and Chat. It happens between 10 and 12 in the morning. Emma guides us through that Cuppa and Chat, which is absolutely beautiful. Like I say, it's free to attend. Do come along. If you prefer the online Cuppa and Chat, next Wednesday evening, we've got a Cuppa and Chat that's online. You're very, very welcome to join us. Again, it's free, so just come along. If you want the links to any of this, please do comment and we'll give you the links. To let you know what else we've got coming up. For a bit of light relief, we've got a cocktail and mocktail making night in Derby in July. I must say, I cannot wait for it. If you'd like to do something like that and get social with us to sort of look after yourselves and step away from the stress of being a parent and a teacher, you're very, very welcome. Again, just comment and we'll send you the links. In terms of our upcoming webinars, next week we've got a webinar all about ADHD. That's on the 23rd. On the 28th, we've got a webinar by the amazing Jodie Smitten, who's also now called Jodie Clark. Jodie's going to be talking to us about autism and emotional regulation in autism. And I think that's going to be so insightful because her work is phenomenal. And then the beginning of June, we've got a webinar on Tourette's, which again is something else that's coming to the forefront in the mainstream media. You know, there's a lot of research, a lot of development. So we're going to be learning all about the latest on Tourette's and how we support our children with Tourette's and what actually is Tourette's, because it's not what we think it is, or not just what we think it is. So if you need any help, if you want any of the links of the things that I've mentioned, just comment, let us know which ones you want, and we'll send them to you. Alternatively, ping us an email or a message and we'll help you. Have a lovely day. I hope the sun does come out at some point. It would be nice if it makes an appearance. And I'll be back in 2 weeks to talk to you more on Facebook Live. So a week on Tuesday at 9:30. I'll see you then. Bye.